Hey guys and gals, welcome to today's episode of Miyagi Mornings. I still need a topic for tomorrow, so if you haven't contributed to the MeWe thread yet, you might want to friend me up on MeWe if you haven't already done so. Check the top of my profile. You'll see that post, and we're wide open for tomorrow. I do have a lot of stuff on there to do, but I'm not feeling any of the ones I haven't done yet tomorrow. So maybe you can get in a subject discussion point for Miyagi Mornings. This one doesn't come from that thread. It comes from a general overall vibe that I've been getting from not as much my community, but the liberty community at large. Like the people that aren't quite as hardcore as maybe we are. But I hear it in our own group as well, one way or another. And if you looked at the title, Why Us, Why Now? A bit of a pity party for our generation, or I should say our generations who are sharing this time in history because there's multiple generations alive at any moment. But people seem to act like what's going on, as bad as it is something unique to the human condition. Why us? Why now? Why do we have to be the ones to be in the middle of a great reset? Why do we have to be the ones to be in the middle of a botched vaccine rollout that's probably going to cause more problems than it's going to solve? Why do we have to be the ones to live through a global pandemic that is an overhyped cold? Why, with the whole world shut down, even when we had all these other real pandemics of the past where people were literally dropping over, we didn't shut down the entire global economy. Why us? Why now? Why do we have to live in the age of censorship, on the internet? Why us? Why now? You think maybe our forefathers would be like, what is this internet you speak of? And there are other platforms that you could be using where you wouldn't be censored and you could be heard all over the world? What are you bitching about? Here's the thing. It's the same but different, man, in the words of Tommy Chong. Every generation, at least at some point, the overlapping generations, have something that happens in the world where they say, why us? Why now? Here's some recent history, because a few hundred years is recent history in the grand scheme of history of the globe, or the solar system, the universe. It's a mouse fart. It's a microsecond to midnight if today is midnight, right? But even in the human condition, like a couple hundred years is a minute to midnight, something like that. So, how about the young couples who had just got married, the young kids just out of college, the young kids that just got their first job, that couple that got married and got pregnant, and old man got himself a good blue collar job because his brother knew somebody at the steel mill, and next thing you know, they were drafted into either the Korean or Vietnam War. That would be, for most of you, that would be your parents or your grandparents. Don't you think they said, why us, why now? The kid with his whole life in front of him, 19 years old, report for duty to a war that we didn't want to fight, that we had no business in at all, that did no benefit to anybody in this country, and people having their lives torn asunder, riots in the streets, all of the shit that went along with it. Don't you think those people said, why us, why now? Why does this happen to be us? Well, let's just rewind back prior to the Korean War, World War II, and the Great Depression. You don't think the kid that grew up on a farm that always provided all their needs that all of a sudden one day saw it turn to dust when he was like 11 years old and just fought like hell to get through it? And at like 18 or 19, he got that same letter that his kids would get for Vietnam and Korea. And when they finally got things just starting to turn in the right direction, millions of men were ripped from their families and sent over to fight another war that, the one prior to that, we'll get to in a second, we basically caused. Why us, why now? A war that needed to be fought, but why us, why now? Let's rewind back to, 20s to teens, early 1900s. Everybody knows the Great Depression. We had a huge depression in the early 1900s, late 1800s. Well, World War One. You think the people that had their lives torn apart to go fight a war that we had no business in the first place that would cause another great war didn't say why us, why now? What about the crime of 1876 when silver was demonetized, destroying the wealth of blue-collar Americans across the country? You don't think they said, why us, why now? What about the Civil War, where this country went to war with itself and destroyed half of itself, with brother slaying brother with grape shot, with men coming home with missing arms, missing legs at a time when you might have been better off dying than having survived it? Why us, why now? You don't think the people that lived in bondage of slavery prior to that time didn't say, why us, why now? You don't think that the young American Republic during the War of 1812 when we had just started to get a new country on its feet, didn't say to itself when its capital burned, why us, why now? When its greatest victory was 2 weeks after the war was over in the hands of Andrew Jackson, and still we had lost men in that. You don't think they said, why us, why now? You don't think the colonists who simply wanted to breathe free, who were willing to stay part of the United Kingdom and under the king, if only they were given some semblance, some little tiny piece of, okay, yeah, you can have a say in your own life, and had to fight a bloody revolution that lasted 8 years, you don't think they said, why us, why now? You don't think the original people that came here from Europe, who simply wanted to pursue freedom without being a serf, that watched the people around them die in the first settlements, didn't say, why us, why now? You don't think the people that, let's go further back, you don't think the people that were raided by the hordes under the Khans, Genghis and otherwise, didn't say, why us, why now? You don't think the Jews that were rounded up in World War II, we'll bounce around a little bit, that were rounded up in World War II and saw the piles of shoes grow as their cohorts were murdered, didn't say, why us, why now? Do you ever think, good, bad, or worse, that there's ever been a time in history where any generation has lived its entire life without ever asking the question, why us, why now? The answer is no. How many smallpox pandemics were there? We don't know exactly, but we know it was enough over time to kill 50 million people. 50 million. You don't think they said during those surges, why us, why now? 50 million. Bubonic plague, multiple times. One time killed off somewhere between 1/3 to 1/2 of all life on the planet. You don't think they said, why us, why now? And it's not that it was worse. It's just, there's always something. People in power will use that power to make other people subservient. And diseases, pestilence, famines, natural disasters, they happen. And the more people you have, the more cowards you have. And the more cowards you have, the easier it is to control a society. It's not that there is a larger portion of society that are cowards today. It's there's more people. So if the percentage is half, you have more cowards. If the percentage is 10%, you have more cowards. The percentage is probably where it is, which is somewhere between 40 and 60. I don't know. I'm not that interested. But if anything in there, doesn't matter if it's 1%, when the population swells, there's more people alive today than if you go back 200 years ever existed. From the time we can tell that man probably existed up till that point, our best guess is there's more people alive today than all those people that were born and died in that timeline. We have a lot of cowards. We have very sophisticated psychopaths that leverage cowardice to control the population. And if you have more than half the population exhibiting cowardice, you put them in a state of fear, you can pretty much control everybody, not only the cowards, as long as everybody is an everybody who buys in to us needing them. But you have a choice. Do you have a choice? Instead of saying, why us, why now? Say, it's always us. It's always now. What can we do with this now? What can we use to advance our own gains and our own lives and our own communities with this now? You're not special, my little snowflakes. You're really not. Nothing you're going through is even close to the shit that your grandfather went through when 88 millimeter freaking artillery was following around him in the Battle of the Bulge. Nothing that we're going through is even close to the real version of the Bring Out Your Dead skit from Monty Python, when 1/3 to 1/2 of all humanity died, when entire towns just disappeared. We're not special. We're not unique unless we choose to be. If you want to be special and you want to be unique, then you're the person that says, to hell with everything that I do not control. I will live for me and my family. I will educate my children outside of their system. I will see to my own health and welfare, and I will ignore their dietary and largely, not all, but largely their medical advice. I will move my family, if necessary, to a place where local tyranny is not in existence. So that at least the tyranny I have to deal with is at least one layer up. County or state. You pick the right place, your county doesn't even give a shit. That's where I live. The county doesn't care what I do here. I've talked to my sheriff's deputies. There are a hell of a lot more laws on the books that they do not even care about than ones that they do. They don't have time for it in their own words. You choose what to do with why us, why now. You can see it as something totally special and so totally unique and different than any other time in history. And therefore, it is something that you cannot resist or fight against, and you are doomed. Or you can see it as something that has been done over and over and over again. It is the same. And at the same time, because we're at a different place in society and time, population, the world, politics, technology, etc., it's also unique. You can see it as the same but different, man. And then you can look to the past and say, who thrived at these fluxes in history? What did they do? How did they act? How did they respond? What made them successful? And you can take the same thing they did, make it a little bit different, man, and do it today. The people I know who run online business, I mean little bitty businesses like mine, up to mid-sized businesses, the best year they have had in their existence, 2020. They grew in the middle of a pandemic. Little mom and pop coffee shops and things like that, brick and mortars, depending on where they were, they either got hit hard or they did okay, and now they're blowing up if they're in places that are opening up. It's hard. It doesn't mean that you can't be in the wrong place at the wrong time, this time and now, but it's up to you to adapt. I know if you have everything you worked for wiped out, it's hard to rebuild. I know that because it's happened to me in the past. But you have two choices. Crawl in your grave early or rebuild. Times it happened to me, I'd say there's twice in my life, almost everything I'd worked for was taken from me. It wasn't because it was this time, us, and now. It was just because there was a confluence of events that worked out that way, and I lost. There's just a lot more people doing it at the same time now. That's an opportunity. Instead of why us, why now? Why don't you ask yourself, since it is us now, what can we do with it? With that, it's been another episode of Miyagi Mornings. I'll be back tomorrow to wrap up the week.